Okay, there's often a lot of videos on YouTube just describing what any recent update is. Today I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk very briefly around the air sweeper, which is the new defense, but mostly I'm going to focus on my early views on how to use it. Now, this is probably going to change over time as we see the game evolve. I'll probably see things I haven't heard of, but I guess the key question most people have got at the moment is where do I put the air sweeper in my base, and how is it going to be most useful in terms of using it for defense. So that's the focus of this video. So the first thing to be aware of is the upgrade path, and so what we've got here is a table of the level of the air sweeper and the push strength. Now I guess what I want you to have a look at is on the just the sort of shape of that curve, and to me it pretty much levels out at level 4. You get a little bit more from 5 and 6, but you know, by level 4 you're up at 2.8 tiles, or almost 3 tiles. You'll get, you know, what's an extra 0.7 on 2.8, so you get an extra 25% for the last 2 levels, but basically you've got you know, 80% of the result in the first 4 levels. So you know, the key thing in terms of upgrade path is get to level 4 as fast as you can. Okay, the first thing to bear in mind when placing your air sweeper is it's useless if you don't have it. So you need to place it in a section where it's not likely to die with a hybrid. If the air sweeper gets destroyed in the hybrid stage of a lava lunar raid, it's useless, and we're back to where we were before, where pretty much most bases can be 3-starred. So as you can see in the attached base, you can see the air sweeper. You know, if someone was trying to attack the Inferno near the Queen, they could approach and knock out the air sweeper on the way, and in which case you've got no air sweeper, no defense, and it's pretty much useless to you then. Next on the air sweeper, look, if you look at the replay, you'll see that 2 things to observe. One is, of course, you get a lot more value from the air sweeper the deeper it is into the base, because for 2 reasons. One is that the area of effect is wider the third of the air sweeper is away from the troops. You can see it expands out, and therefore you get more value from the air sweeper when it's actually hitting at range than when it's hitting at close range. Now the second thing to be aware of is of course, if it's deeper, you're also going to get more value from it, because the troops are travelling further through the air sweeper range. So I guess both of those forces say place it deep, don't place it shallow, because if it's shallow you've got a narrow area of effect and you've got less time where it's actually going to be working for you. So far you've got the air sweeper deep and you've got the air sweeper well defended from the hybrid. I guess the next question is, where do you face it? Do you face it outside? Do you face it sideways? Do you face it into the base? Well, first thing I want to say is I don't think you face it into the base. There's probably an exception to this, and I'll show you an example a bit later, but if facing it into the base, it means the balloons can come from behind, then it's basically useless, and as you can see in this raid, the air sweeper was just completely ineffective and the base got 3-starred. Next question is, should you face it sideways? Well, my view on this is probably not. You've got a activation range of about 120 degrees. It actually turns a bit further, so you've probably got about 180 degrees covered. I think you get more defences and a greater proportion of the base covered if it's actually facing to the outside, providing that it's deep. And I guess you might be tempted to face it sideways if you got it shallow, but the trouble is that the person can do the raid, so the balloons focus approach from the opposite side to which you've got it pointing, in which case then it's basically useless. And probably the worst thing you can do is face it outwards to next to where the Queen's likely to be hybrid. As you can see in this raid, what's happened is the hybrids come through, then that's just allowed them to drop the loons in an order around the base where the loons will naturally path and come from the back and take out the air sweeper without it doing any effect at all. Now, 2 examples of how I'm using it on my bases. So first, this is my current war base, and I won't explain this on the vid around sort of how I think it meets the 400 rule and all these types of things. But what I've done here is I've placed it in the middle of the base, and you can see that it's surrounded on all 4 sides by really heavy hit point buildings. You've got the king, you've got the town hall, you've got the clan castle, and you've got the D store. So it's pretty well protected from the hybrid. In terms of it being deep, it's in the middle of the base. And in terms of where I've placed it, I've actually placed it facing, you know, out one side. and I'm considering reorienting it, but with that placement, if it's triggered anywhere in the trigger range, it's capable of turning and protecting either of the Infernos. If either of the Infernos went down, it would protect the other one. So that at the moment I'm thinking of changing the placement to this next graphic, which is where I'm going to face it towards what I think the less hybridable side is, because to fit it in I had to move the king to a place where I had to move an air defense over, and I think if there's going to be a hybrid, it's going to come where the two ADs are closest together, and so I'm thinking of facing it to the side where I think there's where the hybrid is not going to succeed, and so that way it's defending the likely area of the base where there's defences up. Next base, this is a picture of my current farming base. Now I think this is where there's an exception to do you face it inward, which is on a base, on southern teasers, I think the hybrid is much less likely to happen over all of your walls, and so providing it's not incredibly shallow like you saw earlier, you could possibly face it into the base. But you can see on this southern teaser, I've actually set it up so it's actually got a bit of a loon trap there where the loons might concentrate on the bow and be under fire from both wizard towers before they actually came through onto the air sweeper. And also, if you did attack the southern side of the base on a hybrid, there's no way you'd get to the Infernos. So I think there are cases where you might face it into the base. I think a base design like I've got shown here, where you've got an unbalanced base and you're basically putting your air sweeper behind 3 of your ADs and both of your Infernos for the purposes of really beefing up one side of the base, so you just wouldn't hit the side of the base with all the loot. I think that's a reasonable instance where you might face it a bit into the base, but you can see it's still pretty centered.